Hello. So welcome, Tom, to the show.
Maggie, it's great to be here. Thank you for the honor.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about how you got into this whole field of finding enlightenment after rage or resistance.
I'll open with a quote from Ernest Hemingway's book, The Sun Also Rises, Gradually and Then Suddenly. And the book Fierce Conversations is based off of that. And the scene from that book is these two guys in a bar, and the one friend says to the other, I'm not exactly quoting it per word, but hey, how did you end up going bankrupt? And the friend said, well, it happened gradually and then suddenly. That's life. It happens gradually and then suddenly. So my journey to writing books and where I'm at happened gradually over a lifetime, quite frankly. And it was a lifetime of struggle, of anger, of fear. And I got to a point when I published my latest book, my memoir, Borrowed Eyes and Feet, Finding Enlightenment After Rage, that I had a breaking point, and I capture it in the book that I decided a life of anger was not a life worth living, so I had to end it. And there's really two choices. I could end it physically, or I could end it by kind of taking a U-turn and facing all my fears and asking them if they were really true and understanding them and break through that to find who we all truly are is love. And that is a very, very difficult thing to do. It's scary, it's vulnerable, but I had no choice. And I felt I had to go that way.
Well, tell us first, give us a little backstory on where the rage and the anger came from that sent you down this road that actually was the catapult.
It and the book reflects on it, and I boil it down to my parents getting divorced when I was about 6. And it's not, and the book is not about, oh, it's my parents' fault, or I'm saying divorce is awful. It's a reality of understanding how things in our life impact who we become. And it was always my belief, Maggie, that when that happened, I always believed, I never had backing behind this, but it's been proven that the foundation of who we become is based on what we learn as children. And from the mindset and the ego, we have to protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe. But when we're a child of 6, we're not strong enough. We can't, we need those support structures in place to keep us safe until we can do it on our own. And that's in the form of a parent. And so my parents, and again, this was gradually me figuring this out over years, but the last 5-6 years, because of, which we'll get into, different practices, having somebody to hold the focus for me allowed me to peel those layers away. But it was my parents divorced, and they're still best friends today. So they've always gotten along. It was a matter of, I believe subconsciously, my foundation of stability broke apart. And as a child, I need that. You need that. And so you act up and you try to get the attention of your parents to say, love me. And you end up looking like an annoying child. And you see so many kids like that and you don't understand it. You just push them aside and say, stop being annoying, because then they had to rebuild their lives. And you just don't see that. I never saw that. And especially for my mother, and this was 40 some years ago. At that time, it wasn't as easy for a woman to go out and get a job. And so she had to rebuild her life to provide for her kids, and she did the best she could. And my stepfather at the time wasn't the most, he wasn't the most loving and embracing person. And so I needed that. And I felt rejected. But again, that was the only way he knew how to love, was just by providing, not by love and affection and hugs, right? And it sounds just petty, but it's real. And those things affect the trajectory of our life, because what happened was, if subconsciously, I believed I put up a wall. And because I felt that I had to fight or flee, I had to keep myself safe. And if the adult figureheads in my life weren't able to do that for me, then I had to just push them out, because I didn't want to get hurt again and kept being rejected, if that makes sense. That was my perspective. And so bring that into young adulthood, I started cutting and I started burning myself with cigarettes. And I believed it was my way of masking the emotional pain by creating physical pain. People believed it was a cry for attention, and in a way it is, but I didn't know how to handle it. And there's so many people, Maggie, that cut, and they've always said it's cutting is a female thing. And so now but it's not. And I have friends that cut, and you see the scars on your arm. You're like, oh, you cut too? But to be able to come out and say that, and I talk about it in the book, because I carried that in shame, because I have probably 100 scars and cigarette burns on my body, and I used to carry it in shame. And I shouldn't be afraid to be judged or to talk about it. And I wrote about that because I wanted people that may have felt the same way to know that they can talk about it and they don't need to feel judged.
So was it at this point that you then found help or decided something needed to shift in your life? What was the impetus for you to create some kind of self-awareness and self-assessment?
Again, it happened gradually over time. I spent a lot of time, decades, listening to what Zig Ziglar referred to as Automobile University. I'd listen to him. I'd listen to Jim Rohn. I would listen to so many people: Marianne Williamson, Louise Hay, Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle, all these guides and mentors, as I call them, that were always chirping in my ear. But it never worked, as far as I believed, because my resistance was so high, the anger, that all this love from my parents, even from these people saying, yeah, life's great. And I would say I call BS on it. That's not true. It doesn't work. And a lot of people do that.
Where did the anger come from?
Just me feeling that because of my parents' divorce, subconsciously, I felt that I didn't have that support and I would be abandoned again.
Yeah. And you said you're one of 6?
I have 3 other brothers.
Oh, 3
I'm
other
the youngest.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So your path towards sort of waking up
Right.
was, as you say, gradual, but was there any defining moment that stands out for you as the time that you really got it, that it was time to make a shift and you were ready?
Right. So gradually, and you fast forward, then the book before mine is a memoir about my wife. She was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin lymphoma over 14 years ago. And I wrote the memoir to honor her. I wrote it from a place of love to honor her and anybody else who's been affected by cancer. I didn't realize at the time, Maggie, actually, I did it selfishly for me. It was very cathartic for me and therapeutic. So the books started allowing me to release and forgive myself, to forgive everyone else. So the big shift started after that happened. She went, and then the miracle is we have kids. Like, she shouldn't have kids because of what she went through is devastating on the body. It could create infertility, early onset menopause. And the fact that we have 3 amazing kids is a miracle. And so she went to a retreat, a health retreat, to cleanse herself physically, to just cleanse her body. It's an alkaline focused diet. And at the time, a good friend of hers went, and the people at the retreat said to her, we figured you out physically, but if you go back and you don't fix it mentally, it's going to come back. And that was when I was introduced to my life coach, Bev. That was a big moment because Bev has been holding the focus for me for about 5 or 6 years. And our dialogue is empowering. It's crazy at times. It's scary because I'm breaking away those layers from the child, and the young adult, and understanding why I carried all that anger and to break it away. So then you introduce Bev. That's 5, 6 years ago. I start writing because I wanted my kids to find self-acceptance sooner. I figured I'd write a book and I could share it with anybody else who's looking to find that inner peace. And meditation comes into the picture. Another big part of it is belief, and that's A Course in Miracles. I purchased that book 10 years prior, never opened it. And it was just time. I had it somewhere sitting around. I couldn't find it. I just ordered a copy and I immersed myself in it. And absolutely, because of these shifts that were taking place, or these moments, allowed me to make that shift. It was someone to hold the focus for me. It was changing my thoughts, reciting affirmations, and having some sort of belief. And for me, it was A Course in Miracles. And for somebody else, we have to have a belief in something in order to be able to rise up, if that makes sense.
And Bev is a life coach. It's interesting you bring that up because I am a spiritual life coach, and the reason that I am is that I integrate my meditation practice. I'm a certified meditation teacher. I studied under Deepak Chopra for over a decade. But without self-awareness, it's hard to have self-assessment. And
Yes.
most of us are horribly myopic for the most part, stuck inside of our crazy brains, that what I call a really dangerous neighborhood to be in alone.
Yes.
Is this brain of ours. And so I really love the fact that I can train my clients in meditation prior to the hour then that we spend in creating the life that they envision, or get them unstuck from whatever it is that's holding them back. So speak to us a little bit about your thoughts about this crazy monkey mind of ours.
Well, I usually, and it's true, and I usually ask people if they've ever been in a mosh pit at a rock concert, and people, like, you just smile and they're like, oh gosh, oh my gosh, yeah, I have. It's crazy, it's insane, right? So think about a mosh pit, and I've been in them, and they are They're physical, they're violent, and you're in this pit. And once you're in, sometimes you can't get out because they keep pushing you back in, and you're just knocked around. So think about a mosh pit. And then if you realize our minds process over 50,000 thoughts a day, and this, I reflect this in the book because I was doing an speaking engagement at my niece's elementary school about my second book, Positive Thoughts, Positive Life. And I'm setting up in front of all these kids, this energy is filling the gymnasium. And I'm setting my computer up, making sure everything's ready. And it's time to go. And my clicker doesn't work. And so, and I've been through this before in the business world. And I know that if I don't let on that anything's wrong, then they'll be fine. But in my head, all these thoughts, which that day I realized that's the mosh pit of my mind. All these thoughts started jumping around saying, you're a loser, you don't belong here. This isn't going to work. All these kids are going to laugh at you. It's going to be a failure. And I learned because of affirmations and meditation to say, is this really true? I give my best. My best is good enough. And this happens for a reason. The reason this is happening, there's a reason for this happening, excuse me. And so that was the time I realized, like, wow, my thoughts, to your point, this monkey brain, this crazy brain is driving me insane. And for all those years of listening to all these positive thoughts and people saying, oh, life's great, love, happy, all the mosh pit of my mind was stomping it out. But after years of deliberate practice, I learned to be aware, and I created the Amazing A's that day, the Amazing A's of awareness. They're saying if I'm aware and I acknowledge these thoughts and accept them, if I let them flow versus don't resist them and say I'm awful for having them, let them flow. And then you allow it to flow, learn to recite affirmations. So that mosh pit of your mind, eventually, after time, I say to people, have you ever been in a peaceful mosh pit? And then they laugh and they say, no, for the heck's ever been in a peaceful mosh pit? I'm going to go somewhere else. But that's eventually what happens is the practice, the affirmations, the meditation, having someone to help you hold the focus, it works. But it happens gradually. And then suddenly you're there.
Interesting, because that's what I say to most of my meditation clients is basically, if you can go 2 weeks practicing 30 minutes of meditation in the morning and in the evening for 2 solid weeks uninterrupted, you're going to notice a subtle but a very profound shift. And then you continue on and you start to deepen your practice. It's this idea, what I call response ability. So your ability to respond,
Yes.
being able to, just like you do in meditation, when your mind strays, I teach mantra-based meditation. So I give my students a mantra. So when your mind strays, you use the mantra to bring you back to the present moment. Just like that, when you're encountering a situation that creates rage or somehow triggers you emotionally, you have the response ability to insert that pause when something activates you.
Yes.
And that's the training that meditation provides that a lot of students, even mine today, miss. They don't understand that meditation isn't another doing. It's not another thing on your to-do list.
Right.
It's actually a training, as in everything in Buddhist practice is a practice. It's a practice for when it really matters, when you're out there in the world, interacting with one another. It isn't about the cushion. It's about when you get off the cushion that matters.
So true. Because my coach Bev laughs at me because I say once I'll spend time in my office and I'll meditate or I'll be on a call with her or I'll read something from A Course in Miracles and everything is just bliss. It's perfect. And then I say, I open the door. Right. And she laughs. Like I open the door to my office and then there's life waiting for me. There's kids like running around. Their energy's high. It's just awesome energy. And then, there's things that need to be done, blah, blah, blah. And then all of that bliss is, not that I get pissed, but Wayne Dyer, that's what Wayne Dyer used to say. I went from bliss to pissed. But you're right. It's about getting off the cushion, opening that door to that world that's happening around you. And it's so true. But you really, like you said, you have to practice and you have to be aware of it, because I'm a walking affirmation. I will say 1,000 times a day some sort of affirmation or something everywhere I go, because I it makes me feel better and it aligns me, because otherwise I'll allow that mosh pit to get out of control again from these apparent these learned thoughts that are not really true. So it's really awesome. But again, yeah, you're right. You have to just do it. Eventually it will happen. You may not see it happening at the time, but to do it and to put the time in.
That's one of my biggest, I guess, not struggles, but challenges in being a teacher.
Yes.
Is having people be able to understand that, you can't Google peace.
No, you can't.
And you can come and I'll teach you everything I know about meditation and all the great particulars. But if you walk out of my meditation center and you never practice,
Right.
we just had a really nice conversation and a great cup of tea together.
Yeah.
There was
Right.
really not, you can't expect that there will be a result instantaneously. Like, you cannot Google peace. You just can't.
No. And it's interesting, because the fact that they're there is great. And it's going to take them time to realize, like, okay, you go through stages, because I never believed it worked. I would try to meditate and it didn't work. And then I catch myself in these deep meditations, which were really, really amazing. And then I wouldn't go there again, but it works. But the other thing I believe is because of what I was doing, I would have people, friends, approach me and just ask me just to have a conversation with them. And so if someone's asking for guidance, I just, like being a parent, instead of running in to save the day and rescue them and fix them. And this is why I love my relationship with Bev, my coach. She just holds the focus for me. And she says things to me that I would rant in a rage at her. And I told her, I said, no, this is not directed at you. This is me cleansing, because my perspective was wrong. And of course, the miracle says pain is a wrong perspective. My perspective was wrong all these years. And now I'm shifting it, and it's amazing and it's beautiful, but most people don't know that. But I have a friend who I knew could use some sort of guidance, because they were just they were stressed, they were anxious, but I couldn't force it. Right. And the teacher will arise when the student's ready. And I posted a blog article a few months later called Hate Myself, because I realized I can't hate myself. It's impossible. I hate the illusion of the thoughts that I've created about myself. And this person immediately responded and said, how do you do it? How do you deal with all of this? So we sat down, we had coffee for an hour and a half. And I said, I'll text you an affirmation you can recite. And I did. And she couldn't do it. She didn't have the time in the day. And I said, well, there's 80 some thousand seconds in a day. You owe it to yourself 15 seconds in the morning before you get out of bed, and 15 seconds at night to at least just say this affirmation. That's the first start. But we can't even find 15 seconds or 30 seconds out of 80,000 seconds. And we don't do it. And then I don't have a choice. I can't change. I'm stuck. It's the fault of all these things. But that's all it took for me, was just the first step. And you take those 30 seconds and you hold the focus and you say an affirmation, which your body will resist it. I feel in my body when I would recite an affirmation where I didn't believe it. It would be in my jaw. It would be in my shoulders and my chest. And I knew right when I said, I look in the mirror and tell myself I love myself, my body would tense up. Right. And so we don't do it because it doesn't work. But the more we get uncomfortable to face our love, it works.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that, because really, I think it's the basic human condition to want to run from pain and sorrow and grief and anger and all of that, and to search for happiness. Plus, our society is wonderful at reminding us that we need to do more, be more, and have more in order to be happy. I mean,
Yes.
anytime you turn around, that's the message that we're sent. It takes a lot of courage to confront yourself and your own stuff, whatever that is, whether it's the sorrow, grief, anger, unresolved stuff.
Yes.
But, as in Buddhist practice, the first noble truth is, first of all, you got to understand that you're suffering.
Yes.
That there's suffering in life, and part of us are just suffering because we're suffering for the very same reason you just said, that person is just like, I'm stuck and I can't get out. Well, first you have to realize that you're stuck and you can't get out, and that's okay. That's part of the human
Exactly.
condition, to be stuck in suffering. The next part is, what are you feeding your suffering?
Yes.
What nutriments do you keep giving it to keep it in existence? This whole notion you just mentioned about, playing the victim. I'm stuck and I can't get out.
Yeah.
And, who's responsible for my happiness? And rarely are we looking at ourselves when we ask that question.
Yes.
And then the third noble truth, at least in Buddhism, and just the approach that I use is, start to uncover and discover where the origins of this suffering is.
Yes. So
And
true.
that, like you said at the very beginning when we first started chatting, takes courage.
It does.
It
It's
takes
scary.
time, it takes courage, it takes willingness to be able to look at ourselves honestly, as honestly as you have, really, and confront the demons.
And it feels like it feels exactly like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's exactly what it is. It's exactly what keeps us stuck, is our
Yeah.
own selves, and we don't think so. We don't realize we're living this myopic, it's all about me and I'm separate from you. Because we're not
Yes.
separate from one another at all, but none of us can quite grasp that very easily. I mean, look at
No.
what's going on in American politics at the moment. The
Oh yeah.
disparity in this country is just horrible. But thinking that you're separate from another is the whole basis and foundation for all of war and arguing and suffering around the world. It doesn't just happen to be here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the human experience. I mean, that's the human experience. Suffering is a part of it, but it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's a teacher. But the more we think how awful it is, and then our society's fear-based. All the media is based off of fear, and that's where the money's made. That's how they make their money. I mean, you hear it time and time again, and people believe it. And fear's a good thing because it will keep us safe. But then once we start feeding on the fear, and that becomes, we idolize the fear, then we're just in this cycle of struggle and suffering. And that's the scary part. And you feel you can't find a way out because it's hard to talk about. And if you want to talk about it, most people won't understand, and you're judged. And so that's what's great about having platforms like what you're doing with the podcast and your practice and helping the people you're working with, is just to align that energy and know that there is a different way. There's a shift going on, I believe, in the world towards that. It's just, as like I said, it happens gradually, but there's something happening, and it's really up to us, which we choose to see what our perspective is. And like I said, for the longest time, mine was pain, and now I see, because I created so much suffering, and it hurts so much that I had to make that change. But we don't need to do it as drastically as that. We believe we do, but we don't have to.
No, but it is true that a lot of people do come to me in my spiritual life coaching practice when they've gotten themselves backed up against a wall and are in deep suffering. And so I think
Right.
that suffering is actually part of the prescription
Right.
for self-awareness. And I think once we have the emotional self-awareness and do that self-assessment, then that self-awareness cultivates social awareness and
Yes.
empathy for others and helps us understand that we are not separate. And that how
So
sick
true.
were we to think that I was in it all by myself, because that's just not the way it is. And I think now more than ever, people are at least starting to have an inkling. I've just noticed in the 3 years I've been in business
Mm-hmm.
now, a slow uptick in people coming.
Yeah.
And that could be, my advertising or just word of mouth, people starting to talk about my meditation center. I don't know. But I do think that people are far more willing to say, hey, this isn't working. I'm looking for a way out than it
Yes.
might have been before. I think it might even be
Very
more
true.
socially acceptable.
Well, that's another part of it too, right? Because if you do something that's not acceptable, although it's great and wonderful, but if it's not acceptable, then yeah, we may not do it because of fear of judgment or being outcast, and that's a challenge. But it's absolutely more acceptable. There's so many people that talk about meditation. There's so many successful people, these executives, these stars, whatever you want to call it, that meditate, and they're more open about it now than ever before. And that's where there's a big shift going on, which is awesome. And eventually you'll get other people that will pick up because they'll see someone else and go, oh, what are you doing? I'm meditating. Well, what the heck is that? And that's the momentum that we're gaining right now. And it's creating the awareness by talking with you right now on this podcast, is to let people know that, first of all, it's okay to say, you know what, I do carry a lot of anger at something, and it does dictate my behavior, because to see that is powering, because what I went through could be looking at, because I say I've always lived up to the expectations of everyone else, not my own. And I people, you see this more and more. People do what they're supposed to. They and it's not a bad thing. They raise a family, they have a career, they work their tail end off, and they wake up one day and life passed them by and they're miserable. And they're not sure why they're doing what they're doing, even though they're apparently successful, which is where I was. And to be able to make a change is scary, and it can create a lot of struggling, not just for yourself, but for people in your life. But I think there's an awakening where people are realizing there's got to be more to me just busting my rear end and getting sick because I'm stressed out. I talk to more people who are sick because they were so stressed out, and once they stopped, they healed.
Yes. That's the
And
bulk of who comes to see me. Is
right, and
people with
it's
anxiety, depression, adrenal fatigue, MS, cancer, sleeplessness, obesity.
yes,
All of it walks through the door. All of it.
and it's all in our head.
What
What?
philosophy do you live by? What guides your life?
Oh wow!
Taking a little turn here.
What guides my life?
Yeah.
What? What guides my life is A Course in Miracles. I've always been just finding that purpose. I've read that book. I'm actually reading it again for the third time, but it just talks about the ego, and it talks about love or God or whatever you want to call it. If I say the G word, people sometimes, right. But it's love. What's love? We're all love. And so that's really it. I've always studied and looked into Buddhism, and I've been fascinated by that because you talk about the Noble Truths. I've always studied that and read that and listened to people like Jack Kornfield and all these amazing people, Ram Dass, about that. I've always had that as the foundation. And then, but for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been A Course in Miracles. And I don't know what that will stem out to, but at the end of the day, my philosophy is love. And it's, and you would hear the word love in a different way, and everybody hears it in a different way. And they're like, I'm not, it doesn't make sense to me. But once you shift and you really see what love is, not talking from like love from the physical side, but love, as I would say that love is what we are. Well, love is God, whatever you want to call it. Once you see that, and that's just the removal as much as possible of fear, of anger, of judgment, of hatred. That's my philosophy, if that answers your question.
And don't you think that it's impossible, really, to love others until we have our own self-compassion and self-love?
Yes. That, hallelujah to that. And because you'll try, and we try to find that love and that acceptance in someone else, in a boss, in a partner, in the next thing we buy, and it works. But if we haven't found it within, then we'll just maybe repeat that cycle, and that love from that person or that thing or that relationship with a colleague or a boss will go away. And then it turns to maybe hate, and then you do it again. And you're right. And that's why I started writing my books, because I saw it with me. And if I could share just some tidbits of what I learned about shifting my perspective with my kids and anybody else, and to say, look yourself in the mirror. And people laugh at this. And there used to be Saturday Night Live skits on this. Look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you. And it doesn't work, because people are afraid. They don't believe it, or they laugh. That's a lot of times that's fear, because they're uncomfortable. And so I did mirror work with Louise Hay, like her recording, and it is so uncomfortable. But you're right. You have to accept who you are. And once you see that, then everything changes. And then you actually look at yourself and like, who is this I that I speak of? And that completely changes and takes you on a whole nother path.
Yes, for sure. You get a little Eckhart Tolle in there.
It's true. But it's so true.
Talking about the ego, and
yes,
pretty much it's all he talks about is the ego and the way it gets in our way. What suggestions or recommendations or pieces of advice do you have for anybody listening to the Life Illuminated podcast today?
You just realize it's gradual and then sudden. And when you feel it's not working, it really is working. But it's just, you have to hold the focus.
Continue the practice. Yeah.
And if you feel frustrated, like you're working too hard, then you just need to step back for a second, because you don't have to work hard at it.
Well, it's not a to-do, right? It's not something, another one of those things we need to accomplish throughout the day.
Yeah. But really it's, if you could look yourself in the mirror and look yourself in the eyes and say, I love you 10 times in a row, and actually believe it, then you're on to something. Because I'll tell you, most people can't.
Yeah,
all right.
It's beautiful. Beautiful.
Yes.
Now, where can people learn more about you, Tom?
They love it if you visited my website, tomcorner.net, tomcorner.net, and you can take a look at some of the articles I posted, some of the interviews I've had. You can get my books there. You can look at some of the videos about the mosh pit of your mind, and the 80,000 seconds in a day, how you owe it to yourself to give yourself 30 of those seconds. Social media and my website.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you just a tiny little bit, Tom. I really
Yes.
appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you as well, Maggie. I appreciate it.
And if you're ever out in San Diego, I hope you come and visit us at Satsang House.
Yes, I would love to. That
Come
would be an
and
honor.
meditate with me.
I love
Yeah,
San Diego. Yes.
great. Well, take
Yes.
care.
Yes. You too. Thank you.